So here's a question for you. Would you benefit from ongoing support to improve your sales conversations and ultimately close more business? The Sales Maven Society offers you daily support for your urgent sales questions, an extensive library of bite-sized trainings to hone your selling skills, and monthly live coaching calls where you receive individualized coaching from me specific to your business so that you're able to remove any bottlenecks in your sales process. This is the most robust sales coaching program around for an incredible value of only $147 a month. And you can join now for your first month for only $47. You get access to absolutely everything, including the live coaching calls with me. Come check it out and see if this is the place for you to really elevate your business to the next level. You can do this by going to yoursalesmaven.com/society, hit the join now button. And then when it takes you to that page, enter this code, the number 4, the number 7, and the word trial, TRIAL. So 47 trial, all one word, and you'll be a member. I can't wait to see you in there. Now, here's the podcast.
Do sales conversations make you feel awkward or pushy? It's time to ditch the outdated salesy strategies. Your guide, Nikki Roush, will show you how to combine kindness with selling skills to meet your prospects where they are, and in the process, how to up-level your influence and income. Learn how to earn business easily and effortlessly. Here's Nikki.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Roush. Today's episode is part of the Mastering Excellence series. The Mastering Excellence comes from my background in neurolinguistic programming, where we learn that there is a structure to excellence. And when you can break down the structure of how somebody gets exceptional results in some area of their life or business, you can then apply that same structure to your own life and business so that you are able to get similar results. So today's guest, I'm super excited, is Ruthie Sterrett. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Ruthie in case you don't know her yet. Ruthie Sterrett is a content strategist and founder of a content management agency that helps small business owners create consistent content that drives revenue through quarterly planning, simple marketing best practices, positive reinforcement, and accountability. Often, creatives and visionaries get overwhelmed keeping up with content, so the Consistency Corner was established to help create simple content frameworks which build trust and lead to sales every month. A retail veteran turned self-taught marketer and agency owner, Ruthie grew up in entrepreneurship with experience in blogging, direct sales, and health and wellness coaching, all while balancing a corporate job in retail marketing and being a mom. As a Midwest native, now in Florida, she lives by the motto, work hard and be nice, and loves to cheer others on in their pursuit of big goals. Ruthie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I always like to give some context to how we got connected. And I will say, I'm happy for you to tell this story too, but Ruthie reached out to me through Instagram. And so we had this great conversation back and forth, but we actually met before that.
Yeah. So I was a corporate side hustler. So I had a, network marketing business, trying to figure out what that looked like, trying to figure out how I could get some time and financial freedom while working in corporate retail marketing. And I joined Holly Haynes's mastermind, and Nikki was a guest speaker probably a year or so ago. And I have actually a background in sales. My degree from college is in selling and sales management. And so I loved everything that Nikki had to say. And I just thought her use of language was so inspiring and interesting. So we, kind of stayed in touch through Instagram. And as I've started my own podcast and left my corporate job and started my own agency, I reached out to her and said, hey, let's collaborate. Let's connect on some things. So I'm really excited for our conversation today.
I'm excited too. And I just want to give a shout out to Holly. I love her so much. And we were in an incubator together last year program and got to know her and her husband, and they're good people. So
yes. And I would say anybody who is a corporate side hustler, absolutely. She's a great person to follow and for resources. And even if you are working in your business full time, she can definitely teach you ways to streamline and strategize so that you don't go from working 24/7 for someone else to working 24/7 for yourself.
That's right. Right. And she's been on the podcast as well. So Holly Haynes, check her out. Totally love her to pieces. Okay. So our topic today that we're going to talk about is not getting lost in the social media scroll, because I think that is one of those huge time sucks. And I mean, I want to hear this from your perspective, but I also think it's one of those things that can be, you get into that comparison mode of like, look how everybody else is doing so well. I'm struggling this month, or I'm struggling right now in my life or business or whatever. And it starts to make you feel less than. So I think we all need to get out of the social media scroll. Sometimes I wish I could give it up.
It's as much as it's a time suck, it's also an energy suck. And where I realized this is when I was working in corporate, the role that I was in at the time, I was actually overseeing 16 different profiles for different social media, between Instagram and Facebook, 16 different profiles. So I was constantly finding myself, and, I was doing that in addition to like doing 100 other things, which we often do as we wear all these hats. Yeah. But I was finding myself constantly on the app, constantly going back to it, constantly refreshing. And even when I would sit down and quote unquote scroll for fun, I would spend 30, 45 minutes to an hour, put my phone down and think, that added zero value to my life. Mm-hmm. I do not feel any better after spending that time on that app. In fact, I feel worse. But then the very next hour, I pick my phone up and do it again because it's addicting. And I realized as I was building my business to support small business owners who are trying to do their own marketing while running their business and working in their business and on their business, that social media, we have to figure out a way to stop the scroll and take back our energy without sacrificing our marketing strategy. Because as business owners, we do have to be visible and we do have to use these platforms to connect and build relationships. But how do we do it on our own terms?
Yes. Love this. All right. So we're going to jump into the actual questions here. So my first question for you is, if I got to stand in and be Ruthie for a day, how would I have to think or behave like you in order to not get lost in that social media scroll?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know a lot of times people start out when they're learning marketing or business or branding, and they use the scroll for inspiration. I'm going to scroll for inspiration. I'm going to sit down and look for ideas. And the very first thing is we have to stop doing that, because the ideas, when we're pulling from other people and just trying to copy, it ends up being copy paste. It doesn't actually connect with your audience because it's not authentically you. So once we get really, really clear and self-aware in who we are, what our brand stands for, what are our brand values, what are the content pillars that we're really passionate about talking about, then what I find is you start to have content ideas outside of looking at other people's content. Like I now will be having a conversation with a friend over lunch, and like I'll think of an analogy between the salad that we're eating and a lesson that I want to teach to my audience.
Yes.
And I've trained my brain to now that, as an agency owner and content strategist, I even see this for other people. Like I have a friend, I just messaged her. She shared a podcast with 43 things she's learned in 43 years, which Lori Oberbreckling, Secrets of Supermom, highly recommend that if you're a mom. That's a great podcast. But I messaged her and I was like, Lori, this is your next book. You could totally turn this into lessons from a supermom and all these things. And I just think about content without having to seek it out because I've trained my brain to do that.
I think that is so freaking brilliant. So first of all, if you're looking for inspiration, social media is not the place to go. So I think that right there, mic drop. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And I love this idea of having some real clarity around your own content strategy, your messaging, your brand. But I loved how you shared the example of like being at lunch with a friend and, looking for ways to make connection. And I will say I do that as well. And I find those connections. And sometimes those are the things that people often they resonate. I was just thinking this morning because of something somebody asked me about this idea around somebody using their idea. And then I started thinking I remember when I came up with this idea for something and how I came up with it. And it was I was a passenger in a car and I was looking out the window and I was thinking about what I wanted to create. And I saw this sign and I was like, oh, and it just spurred this big idea for me, which then I used for years and years and years in my business. So
yeah.
I love that so much.
And the thing is too, and you said talking to somebody and they asked you a question, I tell my clients all the time, after you work with one of your customers, sit down and jot some notes down. What questions did that customer ask you? Because you, as the business owner, whatever you do, whether you're a service provider or a product-based business, you're an expert. So you don't have questions, but your customers do. And that's the content that you should be creating, is answering those questions. And I get a lot of business owners, they get tripped up because they're like, well, everybody knows that. No. You know that. Your customer doesn't.
I'm guilty of that so many times in my life too, of thinking this, and I've told this story probably a million times. When somebody first said, you should teach people how to sell, I said, that's dumb. Everybody already knows what I know.
Yes, but they don't,
Right.
It is a skill that can be learned. It just takes time. And I remember in my retail management days. So this is a funny story. I was a store manager. I worked for Victoria's Secret and I worked there for 15 years. I mean, from the time I was 18 till I had my son. And I remember when I would train new associates and I would teach them about product features and benefits. And they would look at me and say, deer in headlights, oh my God, how do you know all this stuff? And I'm like, I just do. I've been doing this for 15 years. I just know it. It comes naturally. And I don't remember what it feels like to not know. I don't remember what it feels like to be new. So then when I shifted my career and went into the footwear industry and running shoes, I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be new. All these terms and features and benefits of this completely different industry that I didn't know. And I love actually that I had that experience, because it now really helps me put my brain into the brain of the customer, because the customer doesn't know. And we've got to really break it down for them.
That is a brilliant, brilliant point. Okay. So I'm thinking about this getting lost in the social media scroll. What specifically would I have to do to behave like you so I don't do this?
Yeah. Well, there's two things. The very first thing is use your screen time app on your phone to check in and see how much time you're actually spending on the apps, because it's probably more than you realize. You probably think, oh, I'm only spending 30 minutes, 45 minutes. But what about all the times that you're at a stoplight and you scroll for a few minutes? What about the times that you're standing in the grocery store and you scroll for a few minutes? What about the times that you're actually at dinner with your family and you're looking at your phone while you're supposed to be talking to your family? You're not counting those times, but they're adding up and they're influencing the way that you think and the way that you experience the app and the world. So number one is to be aware. And once you are aware, have some self-compassion. I mean, yeah, there are times that my little notification every Sunday pops up that says your screen time was down 10% from last week. And I'm like, oh, good for me. And then I'll be like, you average 6 hours and 11 minutes a day. And I'm like, oh, not good for me. Wherever you are, that's the baseline. And then to ask yourself, okay, if I spent 6 hours of this day looking at this little rectangle in my hand, how do I feel? And is that how I want to feel? Because chances are it's probably not. So then once you've got that baseline, the next thing I do is really intentionally use timers. And whether it's setting a timer on my phone and saying okay, you've set this time aside for either engagement, or you've set this time aside as true relaxation, because I love Instagram. I love funny memes. I love reels. I love seeing what my friends are doing. Sometimes I'm not using it as a business owner. I'm using it as a human. And that's okay. but setting a timer to say, hey, you have 30 minutes to do this. And when the timer goes off, go put your phone on the other side of the room and get back to doing something else. And then in addition to just a timer is you can set app limits in your phone, or at least I know that on iPhone you can, I'm sure you can with an Android too, but you can set app limits. So after I set my app limit for 90 minutes for Instagram and Facebook, and so it'll tell me, hey, you have 5 minutes left on your app today. And if it's telling me that at 10 o'clock in the morning, like, oh, it's time to pull it back because I shouldn't be hitting my limit that early in the day.
So smart. It's, what you pay attention to it matters. So if you're not paying attention,
these are things that, I've developed these kind of guardrails or habits over the last 4 or 5 years. And I still have to take reminders. I still have to remind myself and go through seasons where I'm like, hey, this is not serving you right now. It's time to pull, the boundaries back up. It's time to really reinforce and pay attention to the boundaries, because the more that we do spend time on the app, the more we let the usage creep up and up and up, because the app is designed to do that. That's how they make money. And I think learning that and understanding that like, yes, as a consumer, this app is free for you, but what it costs you is your time. And the apps, they want you to spend more time on them so that they can sell more space to advertisers, because that's how they make money. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It is what it is. But being aware of that is really helpful.
I remember when I left my corporate job and I was kind of in between before I had started Sales Maven. And it was the first time that I realized how this was really before social media. I think Facebook was around, but I wasn't on it. And so it was back in 2011, 2012. And when I left, I realized that every time I would get in the car, I felt like I was missing something. And it was this huge aha moment when I realized that I never drove in a car without carrying my BlackBerry in my hand. This was back when there were BlackBerries, like before the iPhone. In corporate, where they didn't let you have Apple products, so we had BlackBerries. And it was like, I didn't know how to drive without holding a BlackBerry. And I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing ever, that I don't know how to like, I feel like I can't drive, something's missing, and I'm not holding some device in my hand.
Right. Because you conditioned yourself for that being normal. And now your new normal felt uncomfortable because it was different.
Yeah. It took some getting used to. And now, there's all these cool things that you can like stick your phone in the thing and it holds it for you. This was prior to all of that. But yeah, it's just such a big awareness when you find yourself like really not even paying attention to something that has become this absolute huge time suck for you. Something that's just really not serving you. I mean, me driving, holding my BlackBerry had no value at all.
Yeah. And that was the biggest eye opener for me. It was like, I already, I was working a corporate job. I had a elementary school age child, or he might have even been preschool at that time. And I had a side business and I was pressed for time. And so then after I spent 30 minutes, 45 minutes one day on this app, I was like, that didn't add any value to my day. It didn't serve me one bit. So why am I, wasting that time? And what happens is sometimes it does serve us. Sometimes we see a funny meme, or we see a post from a friend that makes us feel good, or whatever. So we're chasing it. We're scrolling constantly, chasing that feeling, where it's like, you know what, instead of scrolling and chasing that feeling and trying to find that one thing, what if I did something else that was more beneficial, like reach out to a friend, or go outside and spend some time in the sunshine, or read a book with my son, like just really being intentional about how we're spending our time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. Okay. So you might feel like you've said this, and if so, that's fine. But I want to ask you, just in case, what are your goals when it comes to not getting lost in the social media scroll?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say number one, as a business owner, my goal is to have a framework in place where I'm leveraging social media as a container to grow my business. It is not the end all be all marketing strategy. In fact, it's not a marketing strategy at all. It's a container for my message. And I use the analogy where a coffee cup isn't coffee. It's a container for the coffee. And social media is the same thing. It is a container for my message. So my goal when I was building out my marketing strategy was to have other containers for my message. So I have a podcast, and other people, they're like, oh, well, I don't have a podcast. Okay, well, what about a blog? What about videos, longer form videos? Some sort of long form legacy content that can be another container for your message. And then what we can do is we can take those long form messages, break them down into little bits, put them on social media. Yeah. And then it's not becoming like, oh my gosh, I have to learn this TikTok dance, or, oh, I have to search for trending audio, or all the things that the algorithm and the trend and the, influencers are telling you how you have to do. No, you can do what feels good for you to get your message out into that container in a way that's not super overwhelming, because we've clarified our message and used other containers for our marketing. So, that's number one as a business owner, my goal. And then the second thing is just like we've talked about, to be really super aware of how I use the app, because I do like to use it as a human. I even like to use it as a business owner, even though it's funny, because even though I teach and coach around long form content, my instinct goes to social media ideas first. So for me, it's almost like I'll have an idea for a post, and then I have to think about, well, can I turn that into a podcast? Can we expand upon that? Could I turn that into a, masterclass or a long form training, or a, piece of a course, versus just it being a post, so that when I'm on the app, I'm really intentional about the time that I'm using it. And there are definitely times, like I said, I have to be careful with these boundaries. So there are times that, like, Nikki and I are sitting here looking at each other on Zoom. You can see me at my desk. I have to take my phone and throw it on the couch behind me, because I keep picking it up and looking at it. And then I'm reminding myself that, like, this is not serving you. Focus in on the task that you've got to work on, and stop picking up your phone for a distraction.
I loved everything you just said, but there was one thing in particular that I just wanted to highlight to the audience, because I feel like Ruthie just gave us all this incredible gold nugget. And it was, when you have an idea and your first instinct is to post it on social media, that you should take a step back and go, how can I take this idea and turn it into long form content, something much more usable, and then, essentially like develop on the idea and make it something of, I'm adding words here, so please correct me if you're like, that's not what I meant, Nikki, but it's like, give it some meat, give it some structure, give it some real attention.
Yeah.
Turn it into something. I just feel like I had a light bulb moment go off right there when you said that. So I just wanted to comment on it.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I love what you do around your work with NLP, is because you're using language to connect with people. And, as a strategist, as somebody who really hones in on communication and connecting with people on an individual level, you can take one concept and, quite honestly, probably talk about it 15 different ways. And each way is going to reach and resonate with somebody different. So we sometimes think like, oh, well, I sound like a broken record. I've said the same thing over and over again. Well, I tell people all the time, think about when you talk to your kids. Do you have to tell them the same thing over and over again? You sure do. And eventually they're going to listen. But even as adults, we're the same way. We talked about that. I was in Holly's mastermind, and I've continued to work with her in her alumni mastermind. And I have listened to her podcast for 2 years, and she will have podcast episodes where she taught me something. She teaches on something that she taught 2 years ago, and I needed to hear it again. And it's helpful again. So it's okay to expand on those same ideas and put new spins on them and talk about them different ways. People aren't going to get bored of what you have to say, which I think a lot of people worry about, which we don't need to worry about at all.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I had this conversation last night with a really important person in my life who was giving me some really beautiful props for some things that he was giving me credit for. I was recognizing, I'm struggling to say this now. I was recognizing him for some really big strides that he had made. And he was then turning it back around and saying, I learned these things from you. And I was like, well, that's incredibly flattering. Thank you so much. And we were kind of joking about it because there were some periods of time where I was willing to offer this kind of information. He was not willing to receive this type of information. So even though it's like all of a sudden, I think they say this about teenagers too, like, it's not until a teenager gets into their like 20s that they realize that their parents are actually like smart individuals. And so it's like all of a sudden, like, in my 20s, you got so much smarter. And it's like, no, I've been this way this whole time.
Yeah, I didn't suddenly get smarter. I knew this stuff all along. You just learned how to listen. No, that's so true. And I've heard the same thing about with books. Let's say there's a personal development book that like everybody in your circle is reading. Everybody thinks it's so great. You pick it up and you're like, this is not for me. And then maybe a couple years later, you pick it up again and you're like, wow, this is a great book. Like you just weren't in a place to hear it. But now you have different needs and you're in a different place. And so it resonates differently.
Yes. It's that quote, which actually this person quoted back to me when I joked with them about, like, I didn't just come upon this information in the last year. Like this is, these things that he was giving me credit for. I'm like, I've been doing this now for almost 20 years, kind of thing. And he was like, that quote, like, which he also learned from me, which was funny. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Do you know that quote?
Yeah.
So exactly the stuff that you're saying here. Okay. My next question is for you. So you've got your really clear goals around like not getting lost in the scroll. What do you actually do to reach the goals?
That's a great question. And I am a Enneagram 3 box checker, list maker, process driven person. And, I recently read something from another entrepreneur. It's actually an investor who's one of my clients, but he said, so often we want as entrepreneurs, we want every single step to be an event. And it's not, it's a process. And the process leads us to the event and the thing. And so staying focused on the process is so incredibly important. If you have a goal, let's say you have a launch coming up, or you are, you've set a financial goal for yourself to sign so many clients. And yes, we want to celebrate that if we hit it, but we also want to celebrate along the way that I published a podcast every single week, or I wrote a blog post every single month the way that I said that I would, or I sent 5 podcast pitches every single week the way that I determined that I would in order to reach that goal. So we celebrate the process because sometimes, unfortunately, the progress takes more time than we want it to, and we get discouraged. But if we say instead, hey, I was consistent with the process and I'm going to celebrate that, our confidence grows so that the progress actually does come.
Oh my gosh. I feel like hit stop on the podcast right now and then go back, start from the beginning of her answer and listen to this and like let it soak into your soul what you just said, Ruthie. That was so
and that applies in literally any area of your life. Health and fitness, your business, relationships, money, any goal you're trying to hit. You've got to stay focused on and celebrate the process in order to see the progress.
Yeah. We often forget, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this just for the sake of time, but in NLP, we teach that there's a difference between analog thinking and digital thinking. And most people get stuck because they're in digital thinking. Digital is like, yes, no, black, white, all, it's all or nothing kind of thinking. Analog thinking is like increments, how you're just making progress. But the thing that I know to be true from working with so many clients and also in my own experience is we often only remember our progress from the previous like little click up. So I always compare it to like a dimmer switch. You know, if you're turning the lights up and it's like click one way, like one little click, okay, it's a little brighter, little another click, a little bit brighter. You only remember the difference between where you are right now and this last little piece. And you often forget all that progress that you made. So celebrating these little wins will help cement those little pieces of progress. So I love that. I love that so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I highly, highly recommend the book, The Compound Effect by Darren
I
Hardy.
love that book.
If you haven't read it yet, that's such a good book and such a great reminder of that. Like sometimes you don't see the progress, but we have to stick to the process or we'll never see it.
I love that you brought that up. I think about the compound effect. I'm going to probably say weekly. Like it is so stuck in my brain and I have to like remind myself of it. So yes, thank you for that recommendation. Okay. So how do you know when it's time to stop? Like you've done this, you've got your goals, you've got your process. How do you know when it's time to stop paying attention to the scroll? Or I should reframe that. How do you know it's time to stop not getting lost in the scroll for social media?
I think it goes back to how do I want to feel? And is what I'm doing helping me achieve that feeling? And, you know, like I said, there's times that I'm spending more time scrolling and then we'll realize this is not serving me and it's time to dial it back. And then there's other times where I'll let myself have more time scrolling because it's maybe vacation. And, you know, I remember listening to somebody talk about taking social free Sundays or social free weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what? I like to spend time on social on the weekends because that's when I actually have the time to do it. Where like Monday through Friday, I need to be more focused on tasks and client work and working in my business. So if I'm going to take a 24-hour break from social media, it should be on like a Wednesday. So, you know, I'll say several years into being in the marketing industry, in the marketing space, I can't say there's ever been a time that I can stop paying attention to whether or not I'm scrolling too much or not enough. It's a constant ebb and flow. And it's just that being aware of how much time am I spending? Is this serving me? Because sometimes it is. You know, you and I connected on Instagram. I connect with a lot of other collaboration partners, even clients on Instagram. So there is a reason for me to be on there. I'm never going to say like, I'm not going to spend time on there, but being aware of how much time am I spending and is it serving me? And then making adjustments in those processes to make sure that I'm achieving the feeling that I want to achieve.
I love this back to it, like asking yourself, how do I want to feel? And is what I'm doing leading to that feeling? Mm-hmm. Like that is such a concrete, like being able to check in with yourself. So, so important.
Yeah. I know for me, for this year, you know, my goal, my word, I do a word of the year every year. And this year my word is aligned, but my goal is to feel joyful, grateful, energized, and aligned. And so, yeah, sometimes scrolling reels makes me feel joyful. Because it's fun, because the songs are fun. I like it. But then I realize sometimes that, hey, I've been doing this too much and I'm not feeling so energized. And so I've got to do other activities that bring me energy, that bring me joy, that bring me gratitude, and finding that balance and that way to do it. And like I said, it's okay that it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Thank you so very much for having this conversation. I do have just a couple little something extra questions if I can ask you, and this will be an opportunity
for sure.
For our audience to get to know you a little bit. So you said specifically like about kind of your feeling that you want to feel this year. So my question for you is, what is something that brings you pleasure or joy?
So the beginning of January, I broke my leg. I was ice skating. I know. You can probably see it. You're on our video call. You can see my walker behind me. I was ice skating with my son and I fell. And so previously, to bring myself joy or pleasure or to do something for me, it was go for a walk outside, go get a pedicure, go wander around Target. And I can't currently do any of those things very easily. So I've had to be really mindful and intentional about and curious about what are some other things that bring me joy. And I've learned it's like putting on a great playlist. It's, talking to my son and having him just like, he makes me laugh because he's 7 and silly, and being fully present in that. But overall in my life, and this is one of the reasons that I work so hard and want to be an entrepreneur with time freedom, is travel. I love to travel. I was just telling my husband this, the whole reason I love to travel is I love that intentional time with my family or my friends where like we have decided together, we're doing this thing together, we're experiencing it together, and we get that connection and those memories from traveling and experiencing something new.
I love it. I love it. Okay, my other question for you is, what's something that people would be surprised to learn about you?
Well, I always tell people my fun fact is I can sing the states in alphabetical order, which is just something that I like randomly remember from the 5th grade. That's my fun fact.
That's amazing.
I don't know that that's so much surprising to learn.
I'm surprised.
It's one of those things that like, I love to make this is a good one that maybe people will be surprised if they don't already know me or know me well. I love to like make up little games like, and this is probably competitive Enneagram 3 me, but I'll be like, okay, we're going to play a game and we're going to, play 20 questions or whatever. And I'll just like find ways to create connection through like little games. My family has told me I should have been an activities director for a cruise because I like to make up little things like that.
Okay. So I'm also an Enneagram 3, and I've never made that association before because I also can make up little games. That's so funny that you said that.
Yeah.
My husband and I do this together all the time.
People say that like Enneagram 3s are really competitive, and I don't consider myself a super competitive person because I live in the abundance mindset and that like, I want everybody to win. And
yes.
I don't need to beat you in order to win, but I do love like a good game and ways to make things into a challenge. Like my son, when I'm putting him to bed, this is how I get him to fall asleep because he's super, he's a very active kid. I'll say, okay, 1 minute challenge. You have to close your eyes and close your mouth and hold completely still for 1 minute. And he'll like, a minute and a half later be like, has it been 1 minute? And I'm like, well, you moved. So I had to start over. And like, that's how I get him to calm down and fall asleep.
I love that. I love that so much. I could go on and on. We have a lot of things in common. I can tell so many little things. This makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's my next question. What's something exciting going on in your business right now?
Yeah. So I have, one thing that I did kind of in Q4 is that I was able to start adding on other freelance contractors to my team, which is really exciting because ultimately when I decided to call myself an entrepreneur, start a side hustle, the whole goal for me was to figure out a way to support working moms. Because when I had a son, I always wanted to work. I never wanted to not work. I just never had that dream in my heart to be a stay-at-home mom. But I thought, gosh, working and being a mom is really, really hard. And I need to figure out the right way to do it. And I kept thinking I needed to find the right job. Well, it turns out I needed to create the job. I needed to be an entrepreneur and create it. But my mission now, or my vision, is for my company to be a way to employ other women who want to work, but also want the flexibility to be a mom and serve their families. And so I'm really excited that as my business grows, I'm able to support other women with their incomes and have an income source where they can do work that they're passionate about, whether it's design or writing or, brand building or social media or whatever it is, and also have an opportunity to be present with their families. So I'm just really excited and inspired and motivated to continue to see that growth, to be able to continue to support other working moms.
I love that so much. All right. And then last, how can people listening right now get in touch with you? What's the best way to connect?
Yeah. So I am also a podcast host. So listening to the Consistency Corner podcast is a great way to check in with me, get more marketing and mindset tips for small business owners. And then I host a monthly content co-working session where I share some content strategy tips. We, put some music on, get some stuff done. And it's like an accountability date or study hall for you to work on your content. So you can learn more about that at theconsistencycorner.com/community.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful to have had this conversation with you and to have gotten to know you even a little bit better. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And for the listener, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for being here. I am so grateful that you continue to show up. Love to hear your feedback. If you have a good big aha from this episode, please tag me and Ruthie on social media in your minimal scroll time to let us know what was your biggest takeaway. It is a complete delight to hear from you. So have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.